The suitcase hit the concrete driveway with a dull thud that seemed to echo in my chest. I stood there, frozen, staring at the worn black fabric like it belonged to someone else's life. Maybe it did. Maybe the woman who packed that suitcase 20 minutes ago wasn't me anymore. "Are you deaf, Patricia?" I said, "Get out." Richard's voice came from behind me, sharp and cold. 25 years of marriage, and I'd never heard him sound like that. Like I was a stranger. Like I was nothing. I turned slowly. He stood in the doorway of our house. My house, I thought, foolishly, with his arms crossed over his chest. He'd put on weight over the years, but he still carried himself like the confident young lawyer I'd married. The man who'd promised me the world. Behind him, partially hidden by the doorframe, stood Monica. She was younger than our daughter would have been if we'd had children. 28, maybe 30. Blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. She wasn't even trying to hide the smirk on her face. "Richard, please." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Can we just talk about this? I don't understand what happened. Yesterday everything was fine, and now... Yesterday I was still pretending." He cut me off. "I'm done pretending, Patricia. I'm done carrying dead weight." Dead weight. The words slapped me harder than a hand ever could. "I gave you 25 years, I whispered. I supported your career. I took care of the home. You did nothing." He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "You stayed home and spent my money. You contributed nothing to this marriage. Nothing to my life. You're a financial drain and an emotional black hole." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Monica shifted behind him, and I caught a glimpse of her expression. She wasn't just smirking anymore. She was enjoying this. "I want you gone," Richard continued. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. You'll be receiving divorce papers next week. Don't fight it, Patricia. You have no grounds, no income, no assets in your name. If you make this difficult, I'll make sure you get nothing." "Nothing?" The words scraped out of me. "Richard, we built this life together. The house, the savings, everything is mine, he finished. "Check the deed. Check the bank accounts. Everything is in my name. You were too busy playing housewife to notice." He was right. I hadn't noticed. He'd always handled the finances. "You're better with numbers," he'd always said. "Let me take care of it." I trusted him. "You have 10 minutes to get off my property," Richard said, "or I'm calling the police." Behind him, Monica's phone was up. She was filming this, recording my humiliation. Something inside me shattered. Not my heart. That had broken the moment he told me to leave. This was something deeper. My sense of self, my understanding of reality. Everything I'd believed about my life was a lie. I picked up the suitcase. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it. I walked down the driveway, my legs moving on autopilot. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The street was quiet. It was 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Everyone was at work. No one to see Patricia Whitmore standing on the sidewalk like a piece of discarded furniture. I made it to the corner before my legs gave out. I sat down on the curb, the suitcase beside me, and stared at nothing. No tears came. I was too empty for tears. Cars passed. People walked by. No one stopped. Why would they? I was just another middle-aged woman having a bad day. They didn't know my entire life had just ended. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time felt broken. Then I heard the engine. It was a quiet purr, expensive and smooth. A black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb in front of me, so sleek it looked like it belonged in a magazine. The kind of car Richard always wanted, but could never quite afford. The back door opened and a woman stepped out. She was in her 70s, maybe older, but she moved with the grace of someone decades younger. Tall, slender, dressed in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her silver hair was styled perfectly. Pearl earrings, a watch that caught the sunlight. But it was her eyes that stopped me. Gray-blue, sharp and knowing. She looked at me like she could see straight through to my bones. "Patricia Whitmore," she said. It wasn't a question. I stared at her. My brain couldn't process this. Nothing made sense anymore. I'm sorry, I managed. Do I know you? A small smile crossed her face. Sad, but warm. No, dear, but I know you. I've known you since the day you were born. She extended a gloved hand toward me. My name is Vivian Ashford. I'm your great aunt. Your mother's aunt. The world tilted. I don't have a great aunt. My mother never mentioned... I know, Vivian said gently. Your mother had her reasons. But I've been watching over you, Patricia. From a distance. Respecting her wishes. Until today. I don't understand. I know you don't, but right now, you need to trust me. She glanced back at the house, where Richard and Monica were probably still celebrating their victory. You can't stay here. You have nowhere to go. And I'm offering you a place. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because you're family, Vivian said simply. And because I made a promise to your mother a long time ago, a promise to be there if you ever needed me. She kept her hand extended, waiting. I looked down at my suitcase, at the broken pieces of my life packed into worn fabric. I thought about Richard's words. Dead weight. Nothing. I thought about Monica's smirk, about the empty years stretching ahead of me, with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. What did I have to lose? I took Vivian's hand. Her grip was firm, steady. She helped me to my feet like I weighed nothing. There's a good girl, she said softly. Let's get you somewhere safe. The driver, a silent man in a dark suit, took my suitcase and placed it in the trunk with more care than Richard had ever shown my belongings. Vivian guided me into the back seat. The interior smelled like leather and something floral. Expensive. As the car pulled away from the curb, I looked back one last time. Richard's house, it was his now, not ours, grew smaller in the distance. Part of me expected to feel something. Grief, maybe, anger. But I just felt numb. Vivian sat beside me, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't speak, didn't push, just let me sit with the silence. We drove for 15 minutes, leaving my neighborhood behind. The houses grew larger, set back from the road behind iron gates and tall trees. Old money neighborhoods, the kind of place I'd only ever driven through, never lived in. The car turned into a long driveway lined with oak trees. At the end sat a house that made Richard's home look like a cottage. Red brick, white columns, ivy climbing the walls. Not ostentatious, but undeniably elegant, timeless. This is your home? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. It was your great-grandmother's, Vivian said, and your grandmother's. And it should have been your mother's, if things had been different. The driver opened my door. I stepped out onto smooth gray pavestones, my cheap sneakers looking absurd against the manicured perfection. Vivian led me inside. High ceilings, hardwood floors that gleamed, paintings on the walls that looked like they belonged in museums. I followed her through a hallway into a sitting room with tall windows overlooking a garden. Sit, she said gently, gesturing to a velvet armchair. I sat. The cushion was soft, supportive. I sank into it like my bones had been waiting for permission to rest. Vivian poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. She handed me one, and I drank without thinking. Cold, clean, perfect. I imagine you have questions, Vivian said, settling into the chair across from me. I don't even know where to start. I set the glass down, my hands still trembling. You said you've been watching me. Why? Because I promised your mother I would. Vivian's expression softened. Patricia, there's a great deal you don't know about your family, about where you come from. My mother worked as a secretary, I said. My father was a mechanic. We didn't have money. We weren't... I gestured around at the opulence surrounding us. We weren't this. Your mother chose not to be this, Vivian corrected. That's different. I stared at her. What are you talking about? Vivian stood and walked to a mahogany desk in the corner. She opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. When she returned, she handed it to me. Open it, she said. My hands shook as I flipped it open. Inside were photographs, old ones, black and white, edges soft with age. A young woman in pearls, and an elegant dress, standing in front of this very house. She looked familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "That's your mother," Vivian said quietly. "Catherine Ashford, before she became Catherine Whitmore." I couldn't breathe. "I don't understand." "Your mother came from wealth, Patricia. Old wealth. The Ashford family has been established in this city for 4 generations. Your mother grew up in this house, attended the best schools, was expected to marry well and continue the family legacy." "Then why—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "Because she fell in love with your father," Vivian said. "A mechanic, a kind, honest man with grease under his fingernails and not a penny to his name. And when she told the family she intended to marry him, they gave her an ultimatum, him or us." My throat felt thick. "She chose him." "She chose love," Vivian said. "And she chose it knowing what it would cost her. She walked away from everything. The money, the name, the security. She was disowned." Tears finally came, hot and sudden. "She never told me. She never said anything. Because she didn't want you to feel the weight of what she'd lost. She wanted you to have a normal life, a happy life, free from the expectations and the judgment that came with the Ashford name." I wiped at my eyes with the back of my hand. "Then why are you telling me now?" Vivian leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Because your mother made me promise something before she died. She made me swear that if you ever found yourself alone, abandoned, with nowhere to turn, I would step in. She knew, Patricia." "Knew what?" "That Richard was like this." Vivian's voice was gentle but firm. "Your mother saw it years ago. The way he controlled you. The way he isolated you from anything that might give you independence. She watched it happen and it broke her heart. But she couldn't interfere. You loved him. You'd made your choice just as she'd made hers." "She should have told me," I whispered. "She should have warned me." "Would you have listened?" Vivian asked. The question hung in the air. I thought about the early years with Richard. The way he'd slowly, so slowly, convinced me I didn't need friends, didn't need hobbies, didn't need anything but him. If my mother had warned me, would I have believed her? Or would I have thought she was jealous, controlling, trying to ruin my happiness? I would have chosen Richard anyway. "She knew you wouldn't," Vivian said, reading the answer on my face. "So she waited. And she asked me to wait, to watch, to be ready." "Ready for what?" Vivian's smile was small and knowing. "To show you who you really are." I shook my head. "I'm nobody." Richard made that very clear. "Richard is a small, insecure man who needed to make you small to feel big," Vivian said, her voice sharp now. "And he succeeded for a while. But that doesn't make it true." She stood and walked to the window, her back to me. "Patricia, you are an Ashford. That means something. Not because of the money or the name, but because of the women who came before you. Women who survived, who endured, who rebuilt when everything fell apart." I stared at her silhouette against the light. "I don't feel like I can survive this." "Not yet," Vivian agreed. "But you will." She turned back to face me, and there was something fierce in her eyes. Something that made me sit up straighter despite myself. "I didn't come to save you, Patricia," she said. "I came to show you that you can save yourself. I came to give you the tools your mother never had. The resources, the knowledge, the support. What you do with them is up to you." "I don't want revenge," I said quickly. "I just want—" "Peace," Vivian finished. "I know, and you'll have it. But first, you need to find your footing. You need to remember that you're more than Richard's discarded wife." She crossed the room and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Stay here. Rest. Heal. And when you're ready, we'll talk about what comes next." "What if I'm never ready?" The question came out small, childish. Vivian smiled. "Then I'll wait. I've gotten very good at waiting." She left me there in the sitting room with the photographs and the crystal water glass and the afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that cost more than anything I'd ever owned. I looked down at the picture of my mother, young, beautiful, standing in front of this house like she owned the world. She'd given it all up for love. And where had that gotten her? A modest life. A daughter who married the wrong man. An early death from cancer with medical bills that ate through what little savings she and my father had managed to scrape together. Had it been worth it? I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. But as I sat there in that beautiful room, surrounded by the legacy my mother had walked away from, I felt something stir inside me. Not hope. It was too soon for hope. But something. A question. Who was I if I wasn't Richard's wife? And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to find out. I woke up disoriented, my body tangled in sheets that felt like clouds. For one blissful second, I didn't remember. Then reality crashed down like a wave. Richard, Monica, the suitcase on the driveway. I sat up too fast, my head spinning. The room around me was unfamiliar. Cream walls, antique furniture, tall windows with gauzy curtains filtering morning light. Then I remembered. Vivian. The house. The photographs. A soft knock at the door made me jump. Patricia? Vivian's voice, calm and steady. May I come in? Yes, I croaked, then cleared my throat. Yes, come in. She entered carrying a tray with tea and toast. She was already dressed immaculately in slate gray slacks and a white blouse, her silver hair perfect. Meanwhile, I was still wearing yesterday's clothes, wrinkled and stale. I thought you might be hungry, she said, setting the tray on the bedside table. You didn't eat dinner last night. I hadn't. I'd come upstairs to rest for a moment and apparently slept for 14 hours straight. The exhaustion of losing your entire life, I supposed. Thank you, I said, reaching for the tea. It was hot and sweet. Exactly what I needed. Vivian settled into a chair by the window, watching me with those sharp gray eyes. How are you feeling? Like I don't know what's real anymore. She nodded. That's to be expected. Your entire foundation has been ripped away. It will take time to build a new one. I sipped the tea, letting the warmth settle in my chest. You said yesterday that my mother knew about Richard. She suspected, Vivian corrected. She saw the signs. The way he discouraged you from working, from maintaining friendships, the way he made all the financial decisions and kept you in the dark. I thought he was protecting me, I whispered, taking care of things so I didn't have to worry. That's what men like Richard want you to think. That control is care. Vivian's voice was gentle but firm. Your mother recognized it because she'd seen it before. Not in her own marriage. Your father adored her and treated her as an equal, but in other marriages, in this social circle she'd left behind. I set down the teacup, my hands shaking. Why didn't she tell me? Because you were in love. And love makes us blind to things we don't want to see. Vivian leaned forward. Patricia, your mother's greatest fear was that you'd stay with Richard out of obligation, out of fear of being alone. She made me promise that if the day came when he showed his true colors, I would step in, not to rescue you, but to remind you that you had options, that you came from a line of strong women who survived worse. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't a feeling, it's a choice. Vivian stood and walked to a dresser, pulling out a small wooden box. She brought it to me. This belonged to your mother. She left it with me before she died. She said to give it to you when the time was right. My hands trembled as I took the box. It was cherry wood, smooth and worn. I lifted the lid. Inside were letters, dozens of them, tied with a faded ribbon. Beneath them, a small jewelry box and a folded document. The letters are from me to your mother, Vivian said quietly. We stayed in touch after she left, though she asked me not to interfere in her life. She wanted to make it on her own. But we wrote, and in those letters, she told me about you, about her hopes for you, her fears. I pulled out one of the letters, my mother's handwriting sprawling across the envelope. My throat tightened. The jewelry box contains your grandmother's pearls, Vivian continued. Your mother wanted you to have them. She wore them on her wedding day. I opened the small box with shaking fingers. The pearls glowed softly in the morning light, creamy and perfect. I'd never seen my mother wear them. I hadn't known they existed. And the document? asked, my voice barely a whisper. Vivian's expression shifted. Something more serious. That's a trust fund. Established by your grandmother before she died. It was meant for your mother, but when she was disowned, it was frozen. Your grandmother's will stipulated that if your mother ever had children, then the trust would transfer to them upon your grandmother's death. My brain struggled to process the words. A trust fund? Your grandmother died 15 years ago, Vivian said. The trust has been accruing interest since then. It's in your name, Patricia. It always has been. Your mother knew about it, but she never told you because she didn't want money to define your choices the way it had defined hers. How much? The question felt vulgar, but I needed to know. Enough, Vivian said simply. Enough that you never have to depend on Richard or anyone else again. Enough to give you freedom. The room spun. I set the box down before I dropped it. Why are you telling me this now? Because Richard is going to call you today. Vivian's voice was calm, matter-of-fact. His lawyer is going to demand you sign divorce papers immediately. They're going to threaten you, try to intimidate you into accepting whatever scraps he's willing to toss your way. And I want you to know, before that call comes, that you have power. You have options. As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I'd plugged it in before collapsing last night, barely conscious. Now the screen lit up with a number I recognized. Richard's lawyer. My stomach dropped. I stared at the phone like it was a snake. Answer it, Vivian said, but put it on speaker. I want you to hear how they talk to you. Really hear it. My hand shook as I picked up the phone and pressed the button. Hello? Mrs. Whitmore, this is James Brennan from Brennan and Associates. I represent your husband in the matter of your divorce. His voice was clipped, professional, cold, like I was a problem to be solved. I'm calling to inform you that dissolution papers will be delivered to you this afternoon. We expect your signature by end of business tomorrow. This is a straightforward, no-fault divorce. You'll receive a settlement of $15,000 and can keep your personal belongings. We consider this extremely generous, given your lack of financial contribution to the marriage. $15,000 for 25 years of my life. What about the house? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. I lived there for 2 decades. I took care of it. The house is solely in Mr. Whitmore's name, Brennan cut me off, as are all bank accounts, investments, and assets. You have no legal claim to any of it. If you contest this, Mrs. Whitmore, we will be forced to pursue a more aggressive approach. Mr. Whitmore has documented your failure to contribute financially to the household. A judge will not look favorably on your case. Vivian's eyes met mine across the room. She gave me a small nod. Go on. I need time to think about it, I said, and to consult with my own lawyer. There was a pause. I'd surprised him. Mrs. Whitmore, I strongly advise you not to waste money on legal representation. You have no case. Accept the settlement and move on with your life. I'll let you know my decision, I said, and hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. But I'd done it. I'd stood up to him. To them. Well done, Vivian said, softly. He's right, though, I said, the adrenaline fading into fear. Everything is in Richard's name. I don't have a case. Actually, you do. Vivian pulled a card from her pocket and handed it to me. This is Margaret Torres. She's one of the best family law attorneys in the state. I took the liberty of scheduling you a consultation for this afternoon, if you want it. I stared at the card. Embossed lettering, expensive stock. I can't afford... The trust can, Vivian said. The money is yours, Patricia. Use it. But what if she can't help? What if Richard really does have all the power? Vivian smiled, and there was something almost predatory in it. Men like Richard think power comes from ownership, from having their name on pieces of paper. But real power comes from knowledge, from patience, from knowing exactly what you're worth and refusing to accept less. She crossed to the door, then paused. Get dressed. Eat. We're meeting Margaret at 2. And Patricia? Yes? Don't sign anything yet. Let's see how confident Richard is in 2 weeks when he realizes you're not going to roll over and disappear. She left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat there in that beautiful room, surrounded by my mother's letters and my grandmother's pearls and the promise of a trust fund I'd never known existed. Part of me still felt like this was a dream. Like I'd wake up on that curb and none of this would be real. But the business card in my hand was solid, real. I opened one of my mother's letters at random. Her handwriting filled the page, neat and careful. Dear Vivian, Patricia started college today. She's majoring in art history and she's so excited. I wish you could see her face when she talks about paintings and sculpture. She has such passion. I hope she never loses it. I hope she finds someone who nurtures that passion instead of dimming it. I worry sometimes that I failed her by not preparing her for how cruel the world can be. But maybe that's a mother's job, to let her daughter believe in beauty for as long as possible. Love, Catherine. Tears dripped onto the paper, smudging the ink. I'd forgotten about my passion for art. I'd given up my degree halfway through when Richard suggested it was impractical. I'd believed him. I'd let that part of myself die. But maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I could find it again. I wiped my eyes and stood up. The woman in the mirror looked tired, broken. But she was still here. Still breathing. That was something. I showered in the marble bathroom, using expensive soaps that smelled like lavender. I dressed in clean clothes from my suitcase. Cheap compared to everything in this house, but mine. Then I went downstairs. Vivian was in the kitchen, reading a newspaper with reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up when I entered. There you are, she said warmly. Ready to meet Margaret? I think so, I said. Then quieter, thank you. For all of this, I don't know how to repay you. You don't repay family, Vivian said simply. You pass it forward. Someday, when you're on your feet, you'll help someone else. That's how it works. We drove to Margaret Torres's office in Vivian's sleek car. The law firm was in a glass high-rise downtown, all sharp edges and modern art. Margaret herself was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and direct, with graying hair cut short and a handshake that could crack bones. Tell me everything, she said, once we were seated in her office. So I did. The whole humiliating story. Richard's demands, the lawyer's threats, the $15,000 insult. Margaret listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and tapped her pen against her lips. Okay, she said. Here's the reality. If everything is in his name, he has a strong position, but not an unbeatable one. What do you mean? I asked. Community property laws vary by state, but in general, assets acquired during a marriage belong to both spouses regardless of whose name is on them. Your husband may have put everything in his name, but that doesn't mean he gets to keep it all. Hope flickered in my chest. So I can fight this? You can, and you should. Margaret leaned forward. Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you want a fair settlement, or do you want to punish him? The question caught me off guard. I don't want to punish him. I just want what's fair. Good, Margaret said, because revenge cases get messy and expensive, and they rarely end the way people hope. But a fair settlement, that I can get you. She pulled out a form. I'm going to need documentation, bank statements, tax returns, any records of assets. Can you get those? I don't have access, I admitted. Richard handled everything. Then we'll subpoena them, Margaret said calmly. It'll take a few weeks, but we'll get a full picture of your marital assets. In the meantime, do not sign anything. Do not agree to anything. Let his lawyer sweat. I nodded, feeling steadier than I had in days. One more thing, Margaret said. This is going to get harder before it gets easier. Richard is going to escalate. He'll try to intimidate you, isolate you, make you feel like you're the unreasonable one. You need to be prepared for that. I will be, I said. But as Vivian and I drove home, doubt crept back in. Could I really do this? Stand up to Richard, fight for what I deserved? My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Richard. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Sign the papers or I'll make your life hell. My heart hammered. I showed the text to Vivian. She glanced at it and smiled coldly. Forward that to Margaret. Threats like that help your case. I did as she said, my hands shaking. Another text came through, then another. Richard, unraveling. You're nothing without me. You're making a huge mistake. I'll tell everyone the truth about you. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. He's scared, Vivian said softly. Men like Richard only bully when they're afraid of losing control. What if he's right? I whispered. What if I am nothing without him? Vivian pulled the car over and turned to face me. Patricia, listen to me. You are not nothing. You are an Ashford. You are your mother's daughter, and you will survive this. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But as we drove back to the house, Richard's words echoed in my head. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Proving him wrong felt impossible. But maybe, just maybe, I could try. 3 weeks had passed since Richard threw me out. 3 weeks since my world ended and somehow, impossibly, began again. I stood in front of an easel in Vivian's sunroom, a paintbrush trembling in my hand. The canvas before me was mostly blank except for a few hesitant strokes of cerulean blue. Sky, maybe. Or water. I wasn't sure yet. Don't overthink it, said Elena, my art instructor. She was a woman in her 60s with paint-stained fingers and a gentle voice. Let your hand remember what your mind has forgotten. I dipped the brush again and added another stroke, then another. Slowly, something took shape. Not beautiful, not skilled, but mine. There, Elena said, smiling. See? It's still in there. After she left, I stood staring at the canvas for a long time. It had been Vivian's idea to enroll me in art classes. You gave up your degree for him, she'd said. Maybe it's time to take it back. At first I'd resisted. Art felt frivolous when my life was falling apart. But Vivian insisted. And I'd learned that when Vivian Ashford insisted, things happened. So twice a week, Elena came to the house and we painted. And slowly, something in me that had been locked away for 25 years started to wake up. My phone buzzed on the table. I'd started keeping it on silent, checking it only when I had the energy to deal with whatever fresh horror Richard had sent. This time, it was Margaret Torres. Patricia, I have news. Can you come to my office this afternoon? My stomach dropped. Is it bad? It's interesting, Margaret said, which told me nothing. 2:00? I agreed and hung up, my hands shaking again. The shaking had become constant these past weeks. Fear had taken up permanent residence in my body. Vivian appeared in the doorway as if summoned. Margaret called? She wants to see me. She said it's interesting. Then let's go find out what interesting means. 2 hours later, I sat across from Margaret in her office while she laid out documents on her desk like a poker player revealing a winning hand. We subpoenaed Richard's financial records, she said, and we found some discrepancies. My heart hammered. What kind of discrepancies? The kind that suggest your husband hasn't been entirely honest about your marital assets. Margaret slid a paper toward me. This is a bank account in Richard's name. It contains roughly $350,000. I stared at the number, my brain refusing to process it. That's impossible. Richard always said we were living paycheck to paycheck, that we couldn't afford. I stopped, remembering all the things we supposedly couldn't afford. Vacations, home repairs, my going back to school. He lied, Margaret said flatly, and it gets better. We found evidence of a second property, a condo downtown purchased 8 years ago, also in his name only. 8 years ago, when he told me we couldn't afford to fix the roof and I'd spent a winter with buckets catching a rainwater in the attic. Why? The word came out broken. Why would he hide all this? Control, Vivian said quietly from her chair beside me. Men like Richard hoard resources because it keeps you dependent, powerless. Margaret nodded. In a community property state, none of this matters. Half of everything acquired during the marriage is yours, regardless of whose name is on it. Richard was banking on you not knowing that, or not having the resources to fight. So what happens now? I asked. Now we file a motion for full financial discovery and temporary support. We're going to freeze his ability to move or hide assets. And we're going to push for a settlement that actually reflects the value of your marriage. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. How much? I asked. How much is fair? Margaret did some quick math on her notepad. Conservatively, you're looking at somewhere in the range of $400,000, plus half the value of both properties, and possibly alimony given the length of the marriage and your lack of current income. The numbers felt abstract, meaningless. I don't want to bleed him dry. I just want enough to be okay. Patricia, this isn't about punishment, Margaret said gently. This is about acknowledging the value of the 25 years you spent supporting his career, maintaining his home, and sacrificing your own opportunities. You earned this. I nodded, not trusting my voice. There's one more thing, Margaret said. Richard's lawyer called this morning. He wants to negotiate. He's scared, Vivian said, satisfaction in her voice. He should be, Margaret agreed. We have him cornered. But Patricia, this is your decision. We can push for a trial and likely win big. Or we can negotiate a settlement and be done with it faster. What do you want? I thought about Richard. About the man I'd married who'd promised to love me forever. About the stranger who'd thrown me out like garbage. About 25 years of my life that I'd never get back. I want to be done, I said. I don't want this to drag on for years. I just want to be free of him. Margaret made a note. Then I'll set up a mediation. But Patricia, don't let him bully you into accepting less than you deserve. Not again. I won't, I said, and meant it. As Vivian and I drove home, I stared out the window at the city passing by. Everything looked different now, sharper. Like I'd been living in soft focus for decades and someone had finally adjusted the lens. You did well today, Vivian said. I didn't do anything. Margaret did all the work. You chose to fight, Vivian corrected. That's not nothing. Back at the house, I returned to my painting. The canvas was still mostly empty, but I could see what it wanted to be now. Not sky or water, a horizon. The line where one world ends and another begins. I painted until my back ached and the light faded. When I finally stepped back, the canvas showed something raw and unfinished, but real. My phone buzzed. Another text from Richard. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. I stared at the message. 3 weeks ago, I would have caved, agreed to meet him, let him convince me that I was being unreasonable. Now I just deleted it. But the universe wasn't done testing me yet. 2 days later, I ran into Richard and Monica. I was at the art supply store, buying more paint. Elena had been pleased with my progress and suggested I work on a series. Paint what you're feeling, she'd said, even if it's ugly. I was comparing tubes of burnt sienna when I heard his voice. Patricia. I froze, turned slowly. Near Richard stood 3 feet away, Monica clinging to his arm like a barnacle. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Thinner, stubble on his jaw. His shirt was wrinkled. Monica, meanwhile, looked smug. Richard, I said, proud that my voice didn't shake. You look good, he said, and there was something almost accusatory in his tone. Like I wasn't supposed to be okay. Thank you. We need to talk about this lawsuit nonsense. You're being unreasonable. People were starting to stare. I felt heat crawling up my neck, that old familiar shame. But then I remembered Margaret's words. You earned this. I don't think we should talk without our lawyers present, I said calmly. Richard's jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic, Patricia. You're making this so much harder than it needs to be. I'm making it hard? The words came out sharper than I intended. You hid assets from me for years, Richard. You lied about our finances. You threw me out of my home with nothing. And I'm the one making this hard? Monica whispered something to Richard. He shook his head. I gave you a fair offer, he said, his voice rising. $15,000 and your freedom. Most women would be grateful. Most women don't have lawyers who found your secret bank accounts, I said. His face went pale, then red. You have no right. I have every right, I interrupted, surprising myself. I was your wife for 25 years. I earned half of everything we built, whether you want to admit it or not. We didn't build anything, Richard hissed. I built it. You just lived off me. The words should have hurt. A month ago, they would have destroyed me. But now, I just felt tired. If that's what you need to believe, I said quietly, then believe it. But I'm not signing away my future because your ego can't handle the truth. I walked past him, paint tube still in my hand, and headed for the register. My legs felt like water, but I kept moving. Behind me, I heard Monica's high-pitched voice. She's pathetic. I didn't turn around, didn't respond, just paid for my supplies, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. In the parking lot, I sat in Vivian's car. She'd insisted I borrow it, and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. My whole body was shaking. But I'd done it. I'd stood up to him, and I hadn't crumbled. That night over dinner, I told Vivian what had happened. How do you feel? She asked. Shaky, proud, scared, all of it. She smiled. That's growth. A month ago, you would have apologized to him. She was right. The realization hit me hard. I'm not who I was, I said slowly. No, Vivian agreed. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Later, alone in my room, I opened my mother's letters again. I'd been reading them slowly, one each night. They felt like conversations with her, even though she was gone. Tonight's letter was from 20 years ago. Dear Vivian, Patricia got married today. Richard seems like a good man, but there's something about him that worries me. The way he talks about her, like she's a prize he won rather than a partner he chose. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe I'm projecting my own fears onto her happiness. I just hope she never loses herself in him. I hope she always knows she's enough on her own. Love, Catherine. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. I'm learning, Mom. I whispered to the empty room. I'm finally learning. My phone buzzed. Margaret. Richard's lawyer called. He's willing to negotiate seriously now. They're proposing a settlement meeting next week. Are you ready? Was I ready? Ready to face Richard across a table and fight for what I deserved? Ready to close this chapter and step into whatever came next? I thought about my mother's letters, about Vivian's faith in me, about the painting upstairs that was slowly taking shape, about the woman I was becoming. Yes, I typed back. I'm ready. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, doubt crept back in. What if I wasn't strong enough? What if Richard found a way to win? What if I ended up with nothing after all? The questions spiraled, pulling me down into darkness. Then my phone lit up with a text from Vivian, who apparently had the same gift for timing as her great niece. Remember, you are not fighting for his approval. You're fighting for your freedom. Sleep well. I read the message 3 times, letting it sink in. She was right. This wasn't about proving anything to Richard. It was about proving it to myself. I turned off the light and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would paint. And the day after, I would fight. One day at a time, I was building a new life. And this time, nobody could take it away from me. The mediation was scheduled for 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. I barely slept the night before. I changed outfits 3 times before Vivian finally intervened. She appeared in my doorway holding a charcoal blazer and cream blouse. Wear these, she said. Simple, professional. They send the message that you're serious. I put them on with shaking hands. The woman in the mirror looked put together, confident, like someone who knew her worth. I wished I felt like her. Vivian drove me to Margaret's office. We didn't talk much. She just rested her hand over mine on the center console, steady and warm. Whatever happens today, she said as we pulled into the parking garage. You've already won. You stood up for yourself. That's the victory, Patricia. The rest is just paperwork. I wanted to believe her. Margaret met us in the lobby, looking sharp in a navy suit. Richard and his lawyer are already here. I want you to remember something, Patricia. You don't have to perform for him. You don't have to prove you're hurt enough or angry enough or anything enough. You just have to tell the truth and stand firm. Can you do that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The mediation room was sterile and cold. Beige walls, a long conference table, uncomfortable chairs. Richard sat on one side with his lawyer, James Brennan, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a permanent scowl. Richard looked up when I entered, and something flickered across his face. Surprise? Disappointment that I didn't look as broken as he'd hoped? I sat down across from him, Margaret on one side and Vivian on the other. The mediator, a gray-haired woman named Dr. Shaw, explained the process. Both sides would present their positions. We'd work toward a fair settlement, civil, respectful, productive. Richard couldn't even wait for her to finish. "This is ridiculous," he said, leaning forward. "Patricia, you know this is ridiculous. We can settle this right now if you just be reasonable." "Mr. Whitmore," Dr. Shaw said firmly, "you'll have a chance to speak. Right now, let's start with the financial documentation." Margaret slid a folder across the table. "Our position is simple. 25 years of marriage. All assets acquired during that time are community property. Mrs. Whitmore is entitled to 50% of all marital assets, including the primary residence, the downtown condo, retirement accounts, and liquid assets." Brennan barely looked at the documents. "Mrs. Whitmore contributed nothing financially to this marriage. She has no claim to assets earned solely through Mr. Whitmore's labor." "Contributed nothing?" Margaret's voice was ice. "She maintained the household, supported his career, sacrificed her own education and earning potential. That is a contribution, and the law recognizes it as such." "She was a housewife," Brennan said dismissively. "She chose not to work." "I wanted to work," I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. Everyone looked at me. Richard's face darkened. "Patricia." "No," I said, my voice stronger now. "You don't get to rewrite history, Richard. I wanted to finish my degree. I wanted to get a job. You told me we didn't need the money. You said it was better if I stayed home. You said," my voice cracked, "you said you wanted to take care of me." "I did take care of you," Richard snapped. "I gave you a home, food, everything you needed. You gave me a cage," I said quietly, "and you made me think it was a castle." The room went silent. Dr. Shaw cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should take a short break." "No," I said. "I want to finish this." Margaret squeezed my hand under the table. "Keep going." "You hid money from me," I continued, looking directly at Richard. "You lied about our finances. You made me feel guilty for every dollar I spent while you had hundreds of thousands hidden away. You told me we couldn't afford things we absolutely could afford. And when I asked questions, you made me feel stupid. Like I wouldn't understand. Like I was too much of a burden to deserve answers." Richard's jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might crack. "I was protecting you." "From what?" I demanded. "From knowing my own worth? From having options? From being able to leave you if I needed to?" "You're twisting everything," he said, but his voice was shaking now. "I gave you a good life." "You gave me your version of a good life," I said. "You never asked what I wanted. You never cared." "That's not true." "Then why didn't you tell me about the condo?" I asked. "Or the savings account? Or the retirement funds I didn't know existed?" He didn't answer. "Because you wanted to make sure I could never leave," I said, understanding flooding through me. "You kept me dependent so I'd always need you. And the second I wasn't useful anymore, you threw me away." "That's enough," Brennan interjected. "This isn't therapy. Can we please focus on the actual settlement?" Margaret smiled coldly. "Gladly. Here are our terms." She slid another document across the table. 50% of all marital assets, full accounting of any hidden accounts or properties, and 3 years of spousal support while Mrs. Whitmore rebuilds her career. Brennan scanned the document and scoffed. "Absolutely not. We'll agree to 20% of liquid assets and no spousal support. She's lived off my client long enough." "Then we'll see you in court," Margaret said calmly. "And when a judge hears how your client systematically hid assets and controlled his wife's access to financial information, I'm confident we'll get more than 50%. Plus attorney's fees. Plus damages for financial abuse." Richard's face went white. "Financial abuse? This is insane." "It's the truth," I said. Dr. Shaw held up a hand. "Let's all take a breath. Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Whitmore, this is clearly emotional for both of you. But the law is clear. Assets acquired during marriage are typically split equally. Unless you want to spend the next year in litigation, I suggest you find middle ground. Brennan leaned over and whispered something to Richard. Richard shook his head violently. More whispered arguing. Finally, Brennan straightened. We'll agree to 40%. And 1 year of minimal spousal support. Final offer. Not even close, Margaret said. 50% and 3 years. Or we file motions tomorrow. The room crackled with tension. Richard suddenly stood, his chair scraping back. This is bullshit. You want to ruin me, Patricia? Fine. But don't pretend this is about fairness. This is about revenge. It's about survival, I said, standing too. Something you never had to worry about because you made sure I'd have nothing if I left. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. The words erupted from somewhere deep inside me. You gave me a pretty prison and called it love. You isolated me from friends, from family, from any life outside of you. And when I wasn't useful anymore, when you found someone younger and more convenient, you discarded me like trash. I loved you, Richard said, and for a second, he almost sounded sincere. No, I said softly. You loved the idea of me, the version of me that needed you, that made you feel important. But the real me, you never even wanted to know her. Something broke in his expression. For just a moment, he looked lost, almost human. Then his mask slammed back into place. Fine, you want to play hardball? We'll play. He stormed out, Brennan scrambling after him. The door slammed. I sank back into my chair, my whole body shaking. Well, Dr. Shaw said after a moment, that was productive. Margaret was trying not to smile. He'll come back. They always do when they realize they're losing. What if he doesn't? I asked. Then we go to court and win, Margaret said simply. Patricia, you were incredible. You didn't back down. You didn't let him intimidate you. I'm proud of you. Vivian squeezed my shoulder. As am I. We left the office and walked out into bright sunshine. It felt surreal, like I'd been in that room for years instead of hours. I need to walk, I said. Clear my head. We'll meet you at the car, Vivian said, understanding. I wandered down the block, past cafes and shops, my mind spinning. I'd stood up to Richard. I'd told him the truth, and I hadn't fallen apart. But I also felt hollowed out, exhausted. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Patricia Whitmore? A woman's voice, professional. Yes? This is Caroline Beck from the Riverside Gallery. I'm calling about your art restoration inquiry. I froze. I'm sorry, what? Your instructor, Elena Marquez, submitted your work to our small restoration department. We occasionally take on apprentices for minor projects. Would you be interested in discussing a possible position? My brain stuttered. Elena submitted my work? She was quite enthusiastic about your potential. It would be part-time, paid, and a wonderful learning opportunity. Are you available to meet this week? I stood on the sidewalk, people flowing around me, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, opening. Yes, I said. Yes, I'd love to meet. I hung up and just stood there, the phone warm in my hand. A job, a real job doing something I loved, something I was good at, something that had nothing to do with Richard. I called Vivian. The gallery wants to meet me about an apprenticeship, I said, my voice shaking. Elena recommended me. Vivian's laugh was bright and clear. Of course she did. You're talented, Patricia. People are starting to see it. I'm scared, I admitted. Good, Vivian said. That means it matters. I walked back to the car feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Richard could fight me on the settlement. He could throw tantrums and make threats. But he couldn't stop me from building a new life. That power was mine alone. That night, I painted until midnight. The canvas was coming together now, layers of color building into something I could finally recognize. A landscape, a horizon, a new world emerging from the old one's ashes. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Brennan called. Richard wants to settle. 45% and 2 years support. It's not perfect, but it's close. Your call. I stared at the message for a long time. 45%. Not quite half, but close enough. 2 years to get on my feet. To finish the apprenticeship, maybe even start my own small business. It wasn't everything I deserved, but it was enough. Accepted, I typed back. Let's be done. Margaret's reply was immediate. Smart choice, I'll draw up the papers. I set the phone down and looked at my painting. In the morning, I'd add the final touches. But for now, it was enough to see the shape of it, to know where it was going, just like my life. For the first time in 25 years, I could see the horizon, and I was ready to walk toward it. 6 months later, I stood in my sunroom watching snow fall outside. The first snow of winter, soft and quiet, covering the world in white. The restoration of the 19th century landscape was complete, hanging on the wall of my studio. My first finished professional project. The family had cried when they saw it, the colors bright and clear again. The little cottage by the river restored to its original beauty. Carolyn had called it exceptional work. She'd offered me 2 more projects, and then 3. Word was spreading. Patricia Whitmore was good at bringing damaged things back to life. I suppose I'd had practice. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I opened it to find Vivian on my doorstep, carrying a covered dish. I made too much soup, she said, which was her excuse every time she came over. Thought you might want some. I smiled and let her in. She'd been doing this for months now, finding excuses to check on me, to make sure I was eating, sleeping, taking care of myself. It would have been annoying if it wasn't so obviously coming from love. How's the new piece coming? She asked, heading straight for my studio. I followed her to the easel where my latest painting sat half-finished. A portrait this time. A woman standing at a window, looking out at a horizon line. Her face was turned away, but something in her posture suggested strength, hope. It's me, isn't it? Vivian asked softly. No, I said. Then, more honestly, maybe. A little. It's all of us, I think. Women who survived. Vivian studied it for a long moment. Your mother would be proud. My throat tightened. I hope so. We ate soup at my small kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. Vivian's book club drama. My latest restoration project. The new Thai restaurant that opened downtown. Normal things. Beautiful things. I have news, Vivian said, setting down her spoon. I'm selling the estate. I stared at her. What? Why? Because it's too big for one person, and because I want to travel while I still can. See the world, she smiled. Your mother and I used to talk about traveling together when we were young, before family obligations and expectations got in the way. I thought I'd honor that dream, even if she can't be here to share it. Where will you go? I asked, my heart aching at the thought of her leaving. Everywhere. Italy first, I think. Then Greece. Maybe Japan in the spring. She reached across the table and took my hand. But I'll come back. This is still home. You're still family. I'll miss you, I whispered. And I'll miss you. But Patricia, you don't need me anymore. You've built a beautiful life. And you're going to keep building it, with or without me watching over your shoulder. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still hurt. After she left, I stood in my studio and looked at the painting. The woman at the window. Was she me? Vivian? My mother? Maybe all 3. All the women who'd fought for the right to define themselves. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena, my art teacher, who'd become a friend. Exhibit opening tomorrow night. Are you coming? The local arts council was hosting a show for emerging artists. Elena had convinced me to submit 3 paintings. I'd agreed, terrified, certain they'd be rejected. They'd accepted all 3. I'll be there, I typed back. The opening was crowded, full of people I didn't know. I stood in front of my paintings, the Horizon series I'd been working on for months, and felt completely exposed, vulnerable. A woman stopped in front of the largest piece, studying it intently. She was younger than me, maybe 40, well-dressed. These are remarkable, she said, glancing at the placard with my name. Are you the artist? Yes, I said, my voice small. The emotion in them is incredible. A loss, but also hope, ending and beginning at the same time. She extended her hand. I'm Rebecca Marsh. I own a small gallery across town. Would you be interested in doing a solo show? My brain stuttered. A solo show? Your work deserves a bigger platform than this. If you're interested, call me. She handed me a business card and moved on. I stood there, card in hand, feeling like the world had shifted again. Elena appeared at my elbow, grinning. Did Rebecca Marsh just offer you a show? I think so. Patricia, that's huge. Her gallery is respected. People pay attention to artists she features. I'm not ready, I said automatically. Elena turned me to face her, hands on my shoulders. You are ready. You've been ready. The only person who doesn't see it is you. I looked back at my paintings, at the horizons I'd painted over and over, trying to capture that moment of transformation. That space between who you were and who you're becoming. Maybe I was ready. That night, back in my house, I called Vivian. A gallery wants to feature my work, I said, still not quite believing it. Of course they do. You're talented. She sounded delighted but not surprised. Will you do it? I'm scared. Good. Do it anyway. I laughed. When did you get so bossy? I've always been bossy. You're just finally confident enough to notice. After we hung up, I sat in my studio and looked at the stack of canvases leaning against the wall. Months of work, months of learning to see myself differently. Learning to trust my own vision. I pulled out my phone and stared at Rebecca Marsh's card. Then I sent an email before I could talk myself out of it. Dear Miss Marsh, I'd be honored to discuss a solo exhibition. When would be convenient to meet? Best, Patricia Whitmore. The response came within an hour. Patricia, wonderful. How's Tuesday at 2 p.m.? I have some thoughts about framing and presentation I'd love to discuss. Excited to work with you, Rebecca. I read the email 3 times, then set the phone down and pressed my hands to my face. This was happening, really happening. Over the next few months, I worked harder than I ever had. Finishing paintings, meeting with Rebecca, selecting pieces for the show, writing artist statements that felt like pulling teeth, describing my work, my process, my vision. Stop overthinking, Rebecca said during one of our planning sessions. Just tell people what the paintings mean to you. They mean survival, I said. They mean rebuilding. They mean learning that you're not defined by what was done to you, but by what you choose to do next. She smiled. Write that down, exactly like that. The divorce from Richard was finalized on a cold Tuesday in March. Margaret called to tell me it was official. How do you feel? She asked. Light, I said. Like I've been carrying something heavy and just set it down. That's exactly what you did, Margaret said. Congratulations, Patricia. You should be proud of yourself. I was. Not because I'd beaten Richard, that had never been the point, but because I'd found myself again. Or maybe for the first time. The solo exhibition opened on a Friday in May. The gallery was packed with people. Some I knew, most I didn't. My paintings hung on clean white walls, spotlit and framed beautifully. I stood in the corner, overwhelmed, watching strangers examine my work. Some moved on quickly, others stood for long minutes, absorbed. Vivian arrived fashionably late, fresh from her trip to Italy. She wore pearls, my grandmother's pearls, which she'd insisted I take before she left. Darling, she said, kissing my cheek. This is magnificent. Elena was there, beaming with pride. Caroline from the gallery, Margaret, who'd become a friend, even Dr. Shaw, the mediator, who'd seen something of my story in the papers and wanted to support my new chapter. People I'd met in the past 6 months, people who'd helped me build this new life. Rebecca gave a short speech introducing me and my work. I stood beside her, my hands shaking, and tried to smile. Patricia's work explores transformation, Rebecca said, the space between loss and rebirth. Her Horizons series captures that liminal moment with stunning honesty. These aren't just paintings. They're a journey. Applause rippled through the gallery. People were looking at me, really seeing me, and I didn't want to disappear. For the first time in my life, I wanted to be seen. After the formal presentation, people mingled. A man asked about purchasing one of the larger pieces. A woman wanted to commission a portrait. Someone else asked if I taught workshops. I answered as best I could, still feeling surreal. Then I saw him, Richard, standing near the door, looking out of place in his rumpled suit. He'd lost more weight. His hair was grayer. My stomach tightened, but I didn't panic. I excused myself from the conversation I was having and walked over to him. "Richard," I said quietly, "what are you doing here?" He looked at me, and there was something broken in his expression. I saw the announcement in the paper. "Your name. I couldn't believe it was you." "It's me." "These paintings," he glanced around at the walls, "they're beautiful, Patricia. I didn't know you could do this." "Neither did I said honestly. "Not for a long time." He shifted uncomfortably. "I wanted to say I'm sorry, really sorry, for everything I did, for everything I took from you." I studied his face, looking for manipulation, for an angle. But I only saw regret. "I forgive you," I said, and I meant it. "But Richard, you need to leave. This is my night, my life, and you're not part of it anymore." He nodded slowly. "I know, I needed you to know that you were right, about everything. I did try to make you small, because I was afraid if you knew how much you could be, you'd leave me." "I know," I said gently, "and I did leave. And I'm okay. Better than okay. I can see that." He looked around one more time, then back at me. "You were always too good for me, Patricia. I just wish I'd realized it sooner." He left without another word. I stood there, watching him go, and felt nothing but peace. Vivian appeared at my side. "Was that—" "It was." He came to apologize. "Did you accept?" "I forgave him," I said, "but I also asked him to leave. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be let go." Vivian squeezed my hand. Wise woman. The evening wound down. People filtered out, some with red dots beside my paintings indicating sales. Rebecca was thrilled. "This was a huge success," she said. "Patricia, I think you have a real future in this, if you want it." "I do," I said without hesitation. "I really do." Later, back in my house, I stood in my studio and looked at the empty easel, ready for the next painting, the next horizon. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivian. "So proud of you. Your mother is too, wherever she is. Sleep well. You've earned it." I set the phone down and pulled out my mother's letters, reading the last one she'd written to Vivian before she died. "Dear Vivian, if you're reading this, it means Patricia needed you, and you were there. Thank you. I know she'll fight this just like I did. The fear of being alone, the shame of failing at marriage, the doubt that she deserves better. Please remind her that she does. Remind her that she comes from strong women who survived worse. Remind her that her worth was never determined by his love or lack of it. And when she's ready, when she's standing on her own 2 feet again, tell her I always believed she could. She just needed to believe it too. With love, Catherine." Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were grateful ones. I'd made it. I'd survived. I'd rebuilt. And somewhere, I hoped my mother could see. I walked to the window and looked out at the night sky. Stars scattered across the darkness like possibilities, like horizons yet to be painted. I lost everything 6 months ago. My marriage, my home, my sense of self. But I'd found something better. I'd found me, and that, I realized, was the victory Vivian had promised. Not destroying Richard, not getting rich, not public vindication, just this. Standing in my own house, surrounded by my own art, knowing my own worth. That was enough. That was everything. I picked up a brush and started a new painting. Another horizon. Another beginning. Because the story didn't end here. It was just starting. And for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait to see what came next.